Who buys new furniture for an old apartment? Good morning, All Souls Community Church. Today is Thursday, October the 22nd. And on Sunday, Pastor Tommy talked about something that was maybe a little new to us. In Ezra chapter 3, he mentioned that the people of Israel celebrated the Feast of Booths, or Tabernacles, is another way to translate that, as one of the first things that they did when they moved back to the land. Now, why would they do such a thing? Well, the Feast of Booths, or Sukkot, as our Jewish friends and neighbors would call it, was actually celebrated just a couple of weeks ago. And so if you've driven around Rockland County, you would have seen all these little temporary shelters built up in the homes and in the driveways in particular of our neighbors and our friends. Why do they do that? Well, because from the beginning, after God brought his people out of slavery in Egypt and into the wilderness, over those 40 years, they lived in these little things called booths or tabernacles or shelters. Sukkah is what they're called, right? So they lived in these sukkahs, which were temporary shelters that they built in the evening, and then they would, take down, and they would continue to travel during the day. And God said, I want you every year to celebrate this festival, this feast, so that you remember that you've always been a people on pilgrimage. You've been a people whose home and lives were not meant to be simply in the wilderness. I was taking you somewhere, and that somewhere is the promised land. But the very reality, the very command of God that says, hey, I want you to celebrate this every year, was supposed to be, and actually is, a hint to God's people from all time that there was something not just in the notion of going from slavery in Egypt through the wilderness to this small little country called Israel in the 1040 window, that God was somehow just interested in that. But that the fact that they would celebrate it year in and year out was supposed to be communicating a message to them that even that land, that promised land, was just a window. It was just a window into the reality that God's people were made for a bigger and a better home than this. That this world, in other words, is not our home. And so think about it, as I asked the question in the beginning of this devotional, if you were renting a house or an apartment and you knew you were moving, would it make sense for you to buy all sorts of new furniture and to invest a lot of money in the guts, in the bones of that building if it wasn't yours? Would it make sense for you to invest your treasures there? Of course not. Would it make sense for you to invest your heart there? Of course not. So why would you ever do that? You wouldn't. Well, God's saying the same thing is true about our home here. That this is not where he wants us to invest our heart and our hope for a future. That this is not the place where we should have all of our eggs in this basket. It has to work a certain way, which is, how it's revealed that we're doing that? When things in the news throw us for such a loop. When the wrong politician in office drives us so crazy that we can't actually get out of bed in the morning, or we can't deal with people who disagree with the way that we think about things. When the details of life as we're living it right now overwhelm us, because what we've said is, this world is my home. Now, please don't misunderstand. God tells us that we're caretakers of this world, and we must be concerned for it. So the opposite reaction that says, I don't care about the world because I'm going to go to heaven, so I've got my ticket to heaven, and I don't care about the world, that's equally as wrong. God says we are to care about this world and to love our neighbor as ourselves and to be invested here with our hearts, but not in the sense that says this is where our ultimate hope is found. In fact, Jesus, in his upper room discourse, the night in which he was going to be betrayed, when he's celebrating another feast with his disciples called the Passover, it says that he says, in this world, you're going to have trouble, but I want you to know, take heart, I'm about to overcome the world. He says, do not let your hearts be troubled. Even though you're going to experience trouble on the outside, do not let your hearts be troubled. But trust God, trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. And if it were not so, I would have told you so. But I'm going there now. In fact, tomorrow, the next day, I'm going to be on this journey to the cross where I'm going to die. I'm going there now to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you might also be. Translation, Jesus' promise is that our home is with him in heaven. And even better than that, it's not just, okay, because when you think about that, it's like, oh, heaven's somewhere out there where the clouds are and the angels play harps and I get my wings. Wrong. Heaven is the place where everything sad becomes untrue. It's earth made perfect. And God says that one day that heavenly reality is going to be the only reality we experience here on earth. Revelation chapter 21 says that holy city is going to come down and be the new heaven and the new earth that we exist in and live in forever. Now, that might sound like pie in the sky stuff. That might sound like, oh, whatever, who believes that sort of stuff? You know who believes that sort of stuff is God, the one who made this world, and the one who's promised to remake this world, and the one who's promised to be with us every moment in this world. And I would say to you this, you already know it's true. You already know it's true. Because as your heart aches for a world without COVID, and as your heart aches for a world without injustice, and as your heart aches for a world where there's not political calamity, what your heart is aching for is heaven. Do not let your hearts be troubled. The world as we know it right now is not our home. Our home is with God in heaven. And one day that reality will be the only reality that we know on earth. My friends, God has called us to be a people on pilgrimage, to be a people who are on the move, going somewhere, who live as though this is our Sukkot. This is our Sukkah, right? This place is our temporary shelter that one day will be replaced with a permanent home where moth and rust do not invade, where there is no decay, where there is no sadness, where there is no loss, where there is no death. And he says, I want you to learn to invest your heart and your treasure there. Where have you been investing your heart, your time, your attention? Where have you been investing? Have you been buying new furniture for an old apartment when what Jesus encourages, in fact, commands us to do, because he knows how hard our hearts can be, is to invest our treasure in heaven and there watch it multiply? What does that look like? Well, that means that instead of me saying to my enemy, I need you to believe what I believe about politics or about justice or about this or about that. Otherwise, I'm going to cancel you because this world has to be like this. I have to make it my safe place. Instead of that, what we can say is, I'm going to love you, my enemy, no matter where you're at, no matter what you believe. And by that love, that actively stepping in your direction, you know what's going to happen? You're going to start to see the one who is the actual home builder, the one who's calling all of us to come home, to come back into relationship with the God who changes everything, the God who made everything and is going to remake everything. My friends, this day, as we consider our home, and as we consider how to invest in that home, would you ask the Lord, what does it look like for me today to be one who lives like this place is actually temporary, who can let go of the control that I think I need to have, and who can actually begin to invest in a future that not I'm hoping for, oh please, but I know is coming because Jesus has come and he is the first fruits of the resurrection harvest. My friends, I'm praying that we live that today, that we understand that today like never before, and that as we live it, the world around us and the one in us changes for good. May the Lord be with you and make his face to shine upon you this day. Amen.